Somebody mentioned that they should have fireproof suits in order to play, but Sophia says that she can give them ice flowers. However, before she does this, the narration has to pause to tell us the exact shade of her eyeshadow and mascara. Because priorities. The only upside to this interjection is that at least it only takes up a single paragraph. Anyway, they now have suits that are covered in ice flowers. Hello and welcome to Comprehension Points Video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books and discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of the Wonderland Trials by Sara Ella. At the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Chapter 25. When Blanche said our trainer was someone who had played in the trials before, I never 100 lifetimes would have guessed it was Charlotte. Probably because Alice hasn't even contemplated her sister after she initially disappeared. Even Charlotte's disappearance was all about Alice and how she could participate in a slick game rather than her sister apparently having kidnapped her. Anyway, Charlotte is apparently a real unit when it comes to training Team Heart, and Alice hasn't even had a second to talk with her sister. The entire training thing is beyond tedious. There's a reason why movies prefer to show the entire training in as much time as it takes to play Eye of the Tiger. Except, as I read about Alice doing whatever asinine task Charlotte assigns her, I can't help but think literally no amount of physical training could have possibly prepared any of them for drinking tea in unison while standing on your head. So I'm not even quite sure what the point of literally any of this is supposed to be. Alice is obsessed with the individual team rankings and is upset that she's in a three-way tie and dead last with Maddie and Willow. She also can't stop thinking about the argument Nave and Jess had in the Hall of Mirrors about Kit, but the problem is that she doesn't do anything about either of those things, and the narration quickly returns to the insipid training. Finally, after only a few paragraphs this time, Alice starts to think that there's something more going on, almost like the trials themselves are a distraction over how children continue to disappear year after year. What's worse is that this has to do with Alice. Well, not really. It's about how Charlotte is back, but she's not acting like herself. She tries to call Charlotte out and then really loudly says that Charlotte has always hated wonders. That last part is enough to embarrass Charlotte in front of the others, and she snaps at her sister to get back to her training. Later, Alice mopes around about how much the training stinks. While they had less than a day to prepare for the spade trail, the prep time for the club trials seems so unnecessarily long, which I have to agree about. There's literally no reason for any of this. The only info that the team was given was a time and date. Alice eventually goes to a cafe where her sister is. But as Alice approaches the booth, she somehow notes not simply one other person, but three. Look, I can understand that maybe you could overlook the person on the other side of the booth, but three people? She's sitting with Chess, Dina, and Raven. As Alice goes to sit down, Blanche shows up, and of course the author likely couldn't help herself and slipped in a bit about Blanche running late. Alice is only ticked off that what was supposed to be a one-on-one meeting with her sister has turned into a giant affair with too many others. The entire page after this is nothing but describing the drink Alice orders and her looking around the cafe. I'm convinced the story would have wrapped up by now if literally anybody bothered to tell the author no. Finally, Charlotte tells Alice that she wants to invite her to something called the Night Society. Then she proceeds to not explain what this is, but rather to ask what Alice knows about how the trials got started. Alice basically recites what Maddie had explained in her podcast, which is that Scarlet won the first trial and became Queen of Wonderland. The others explain about how Scarlet stole the crown from somebody named the Ivory King, that the usurper also claims to have invented Wonderland, but in the same way that Queen Elizabeth totally and completely invented the UK. That is to say that Queen Liz nor Scarlet invented Diddley, and most people know that Scarlet is full of it. This also kind of lines up with the conclusion Alice came to before she arrived in Wonderland. Catherine didn't discover the Wonderland gene by accident. It had always been there. Alice asks the only question that matters right now. What does this have to do with her? And while I do kind of want to know why it is that they're telling her this right now, I also can't help but think about how self-absorbed Alice has been this entire time and how self-absorbed she's acting right now. She also asks about the missing boy who recently returned. Dina asks her where she thinks that the boy had been all this time, but Alice, the girl who thinks that her power is play acting at being detective, doesn't understand Dina's question. The only thing that Alice has to say is that he went missing during his trial, and now he's back. The narration pauses briefly while the waiter comes back with their orders. There's a weird moment where the author hammering in the Chess-Alice romance. As usual, she tried too hard, and I think it made the story poorer for her lack of subtlety. Chess eventually says that before he transferred, he talked to one Mr. Quincy. Who this is beyond me. If he was mentioned before, it was in a scene so unimportant that I've already forgotten completely. However, despite how important that the narration made Mr. Quincy seem, Chess goes on and doesn't actually make anything that Quincy said to be relevant at all. The words might have come from a sexy leg lamp for all that it mattered. They talk about how whichever team finishes the trials rules Wonderland for the next year, but nobody has ever actually finished. And no, Patrick, almost finished isn't good enough. They all think that because the final trail is always Heart's trail and it's always a fight with the Jabberwock. Right as I was wondering if I should take back what I said about Charlotte's training, Chess says this about the Jabberwock. The Jabberwock takes on many forms depending on what you most fear. Sometimes it's a monster of some sort, other times it's, well, no one knows for sure aside from those who have faced it. Again, physical training isn't gonna help you here. The entire thing is so dumb and serves 0 point except to waste even more time. The others say that they think that Scarlet's claim to the throne is a sham and that she herself hasn't even defeated the Jabberwock. They go on and speculate that it's the reason for the WVs, to collect enough data on everybody in the hopes of finding somebody who can defeat it. There's also a speculated reason why wildflowers like Alice are sought out and invited. It's all in the hopes that literally somebody will defeat it. And I can get behind the idea that Scarlet is a sham queen, and then business with the Jabberwock. But once they start to say stuff like, we think that those who disappear are those who defeated it, and went on to find the actual Wonderland and the Ivory King, that's when they start to edge over into magical Mary Sue guessing power territory again. There's literally no proof of this, and saying junk like that makes them sound mental, but this author has no sense of actually building up to the plot, so you know that it's actually going to be as described. However, the book has no sense about how absurd that they're being with this hypothesis, and aren't even acting like this is nothing but one possibility out of dozens of options. However, Alice does ask an important question. If all of this is true, why did Dan come back? Chess speculates if it's not to spread the word about what's beyond. Blanche says that Scarlet would have Dan silenced if he started flopping his lips about it. So I guess if Dan turns up dead or disappears again, then that would be more telling. But surely the Queen wouldn't do something that stupid, right? Oh, who am I kidding? That boy practically signed a death warrant the second he came back, if what they're saying is true. Alice again asks what this has to do with herself, which, holy not everything is about you, Alice. Raven says that there's more than simply normals and wonders, and that there's a third option, which is what those knights are. Charlotte finally gets to the point and says that Alice is Catherine Pillar's daughter. Alice is kind of upset about this and demands to know if Chess had known. He insists he didn't, but I'm not sure if I trust him. Charlotte goes on to explain that Charlotte took Catherine's research and turned it into her own thing, and while Scarlet might have taken the Wonder Vision, she failed to take Catherine's greatest invention, Alice. She was born completely and utterly normal, but Catherine managed to change her daughter into a wonder. Part 3. War. I would probably be more invested in the title of the third installment of this book if literally anything of actual substance had happened. That combined with the fact that this is book 1 of who knows how many tells me that nothing of value is going to happen in the last 10 chapters. Chapter 26. Back at the dorms, Alice moans about the news of her biology for a week solid. Then the narration jumps us back to when we last left off because editing things properly is for squares, I guess. Charlotte explains that she met Catherine during her own run in the trials. Catherine was her trainer, but she doesn't know who Alice's father is. As I had already guessed, Charlotte keeping Alice away from Wonderland was in an almost futile effort to keep Alice safe, although Blanche and Dina kept tabs on the two of them. Eventually, Dina told them that it was time to finish what Catherine had started. Meanwhile, Charlotte keeps training the team, which, again, not sure how running laps is supposed to help you fight off your worst fear, not unless your fear is gym class. Eventually, Alice goes to the library and uses the computer to look up Catherine. As Alice looks at the picture of her mother, Alice can't help but note the similarities between the two of them. She reads an article about the lab fire in Catherine's lab that is believed to have killed her. To the surprise of literally nobody, the article says that the fire was so bad that they couldn't recover Catherine's remains. Now taking bets that Catherine is going to be a ninth-inning wildcard character. But the article goes on to say that Catherine had tested normal for the Wonderland gene, but speculates that it might have mutated inside of her, which makes Alice think about what Charlotte had told her about Alice's own biology. The article is written by normals, though, and it has no mention of the Ivory King. And why should it anyway? Even if he does or did exist, why would an article about a woman dying in a lab fire link to a king? So Alice searches for Ivory King only to find a chess page. I don't know enough about chess to comment on it, but the Knight Society is supposed to be based upon chess. So maybe this is relevant and symbolic? I don't know. Next, Alice looks at several articles about the disappearance of children in the trials. Obviously, the most recent is about Dan, the boy who returned. Alice takes notes on the article, including, "Boy claimed he never left, only that he saw what's real." She's doing this when Maddie finds her and offers her some calming tea, which at that point that's simply regular tea and not special snowflake tea. Maddie then says that Alice has been sneaking out of her room every night this past week and begs Alice to let her in. She goes on to say that she knows that Charlotte had lied to her and just manipulated Alice for his own gain, but that Alice can trust Maddie. Which I'd like to remind everybody that while Maddie claimed to have once been Alice's BFF, that was at least a decade earlier when the girls were barely out of diapers. Why should Alice trust her simply because Maddie says stuff like, "We used to be friends"? Alice actually does ask about this. Maddie says that they were 6 when Alice disappeared. She'd pepper raving with questions, and she admits that while it's obvious her brother hid stuff from her, he never openly lied to her about Alice. A year earlier, Raven finally caved and helped Maddie get in touch with Charlotte, which is an insane amount of time to obsess over a girl whom you haven't even had contact with in a decade. It's not who you are. You want to know what I think? Do I? I'll tell you anyway. I think you're a good friend and a great teammate. You're smart and you care about others. You don't trust easily, but you're forgiving. It's not so much that this isn't a nice scene. My problem is that this is the longest conversation that we've seen between Alice and Maddie. The two of them were supposed to have gotten close as they trained, but the narration is more focused on showing us asinine training montages rather than building up this plot-crucial friendship. Maddie finishes up her little pep talk by encouraging Alice to forgive Charlotte so that Alice can move on, in some weird way to find out who she is. And I get what Maddie is trying to see here, but I'm not sure that figuring out who Alice Little is and forgiving people who lied to me and manipulated me for my entire life are necessarily related. After Maddie leaves, Alice looks at the next article. It's about the missing Hatter brother Snark who disappeared during the trial a year earlier. Alice feels weird because Maddie has not once said anything about her brother and wonders that if Maddie is hiding something as large as her brother's disappearance, what else isn't Maddie telling her? And again, I get what Alice was swinging at with this line of thought. But these kids disappear, and so far only one has actually returned. Stark might as well be dead. I hope that I don't have to explain to people how grief works. It's probably easier for Maddie to simply not speak of her missing brother. Of course, I'm saying all of this, but then remember about how I keep complaining about the lack of subtlety that the author is known for at this point. So now I'm expecting Maddie to betray Alice at some point. Chapter 27, and a non-amount of time later, Alice goes to a mock trial. I feel like we've skipped several sections that actually explain this, but no. No, we have not. The trial is held in the Wonderland copy of the Olympic Stadium. Alice has to take a time out to hammer in the fact that the normal world is a dystopian hellscape. After the divide and the borders closed, there were no more sports. No more need for them. Well, and anyway, most athletes turn out to be wonders anyway, so who cares? I'd simply like to add that even North Korea has participated in recent Olympics, so congratulations for making a dystopia somehow worse than North Korea. The narration, however, fails to actually get to literally anything besides simply arriving for close to 3 pages. However, as soon as Blanche starts yapping, we're quick to learn, surprise! This is actually the second trial! Which, good, I'm tired of this book not getting to the point. At least literally anything is happening. And, of course, an entire page is spent explaining about how this is the actual second trial rather than the promised mock trial. There's this really long sequence where a bunch of birds appear followed by a giant hedgehog. And then the croquet field appears, and I can't even pretend to be surprised over this. This is the literal only competition in the source material, so of course it needed to be included. Blanche tells them to complete the game in the allotted time and hints at saving more people. The narration tells us that Knave shows up right then, which is the first time Alice has seen him since the end of the first trial, which is news to me. The writing was so poor that we didn't know what anybody besides Alice was actually doing that entire time. Knave mouths to Alice, Knight Society, which freaks her out immensely, especially because she's Scarlett's nephew and could tell her that Alice is Catherine's daughter at any time. Oh, and the flamingos breathe fire. I have to admit that flamingo dragons are awesome. Blanche calls for the game to begin. Over the WV, Charlotte tells Alice, there's one true king, Alice. In this case, you'll need to sacrifice yours to get you out of this mess. which is about as meaningful for me as it is for Alice right now. Team Heart huddles and tries to discuss what to do. Chess reassures them that croquet is really easy to play, something which the others are quick to scoff over because this game of croquet involves fire-breathing flamingos and giant hedgehogs with equally giant quills. Does this look like it's gonna be easy? Somebody mentioned that they should have fireproof suits in order to play, but Sophia says that she can give them ice flowers. However, before she does this, the narration has to pause to tell us the exact shade of her eyeshadow and mascara. Because priorities. The only upside to this interjection is that at least it only takes up a single paragraph. Anyway, they now have suits that are covered in ice flowers. While they were dealing with that, Jack had been examining the pattern of the constantly moving wickets with his WV. He says that they change every 26 seconds in recognizable patterns of a diamond, a club, a spade, and a heart. Go figure. Willow wonders if the patterns themselves is a riddle, but Mr. No-Show, aka Knave, scoffs at the idea. This leads to all of them getting into an argument. While they're doing that, Alice contemplates the field. She randomly thinks that 26 is half of 52, and then she tells the others that Blanche had only said to finish the game, and not which game that it is. She doesn't think that the goal of this is to play croquet, but rather a card game, and continues on to say that she doesn't think that they're supposed to use the mallets to hit the balls through the wickets, but rather to put themselves, aka the cards, through. This is mainly because as she watches the other three teams attempt and fail to play extreme Alice in Wonderland croquet, she knows that they can't simply do the same thing that they're doing, which is fair enough, I suppose. I don't know how she got to, maybe we're supposed to roll through the wickets from all of that, but you know what? Anybody who's ever been stuck in a game long enough eventually goes, is the answer to jump off this ledge? Do you want me to jump in the lava? So, why not? Just randomly says that the point of the game is to, and I quote, save your queens, Alice, he pulls me with whom the others discard your kings. There's only one way to win at Black Hearts. You know this. I have to sit this one out. I really don't know enough about the game of hearts to comment about this. The entire thing seems kind of arbitrary, but so is the rest of the book, so continue, I guess. Alice is naturally upset over the fact that Chess will eventually sacrifice himself in order for them to win the game. Chess draws her aside and tells her that it's going to be okay. He also randomly declares that her master is a master of the games, despite the fact that all she did was to take a random shot in the dark, and to suggest a play that sounds more mental than actually helpful. But sure, master of the games. With 40 minutes left on the clock, Alice takes up her mantle as the Heart Queen. Chapter 28. As Alice returns to the others, they ask where Chess went. Alice has to explain that they're playing the game of hearts and that Chess isn't playing this round. This makes more sense for them than it does for me. And maybe the author knows how to play hearts, but I don't. So a bit of context would go a long way here. The next two pages are nothing but Alice assigning roles to everybody else. Knave is put on guard duty to protect Alice from the dragon flamingos. Sophia is to grow flowers all over the place as a means of distraction, I suppose. Jack gives Alice a map of how she can get through each wicket before she gets booted out and has to start all over again. Maddie is the team's water girl, which leaves Willow, who I thought hated me but somehow became my friend when I wasn't paying attention. Do you guys remember the first trial about how I commented how Willow was barely a character? Yeah, that still hasn't changed. Their narration will not shut up about unimportant things, but in regards to the team acting like they're all super close, we've had literally no character development. Maddie comes back with some of the shrinking tea. However, before Alice can drink it, she randomly starts to doubt Maddie. I wouldn't say that it's coming from nowhere, but at the same time, it kind of feels like this doubt came out of nowhere. Alice tries to shake off her weird feeling about Maddie and drinks the tea. Even as she's shrinking down, she worries that Maddie did something to the tea, something 100% intentional. But nothing happened other than Alice and Willow shrinking down. They run off, get into a position, and start to run the course. You think that Maddie could have left them a little bigger rather than for them to be microscopic, but whatever. It's only as Alice is forced to run as fast as she possibly can that she's thankful for the physical training Charlotte made them do, which I guess. They run for a while, and they might have had a chance at things, but then Willow starts to get even smaller, so small that Alice can pick her up now. She tries to reassure Willow that a few drops of the Grow Bigger tea will set her right again, but Willow senses that this is it for her. As Jack sends Alice another reminder of how little time is left, Alice calls Charlotte over the WV. Charlotte calls a timeout, which she had previously told Alice that they could do exactly once. Charlotte tells her that the clock and the other teams have been frozen in place until this call is over. Alice says that Willow shrunk down too much. Charlotte is naturally worried about the same thing happening to Alice, but Alice thinks that her normal genes are preventing the tea from working that quickly. Alex explains about the article she found about Stark having disappeared last year. She thinks that Maddie betrayed them. Charlotte tells her to go get Willow and to forget about the trial. Alice says that Chess is waiting in the normal room for them, but Charlotte tells Alice to simply wait in place. So Charlotte grabs the increasingly tiny Willow, climbs into a random flower that appeared right then, and waits. She cries as she thinks about how she's failed everybody. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all of my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've read all of my main Snarks, you can find even more Snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr Snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snarks so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just 1 cent per word. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you aren't following me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!